Our planet is facing a grave crisis and we need to do something about it immediately. That's the message from the world's leading authority on climate science. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the impact of rising temperatures is already being felt and some changes are now irreversible. Let's go straight to our environment editor Nick Clark in Manavgat in southern Turkey, where wildfires have caused widespread destruction there. Nick, talk us through the main findings.
Yeah, Manavgat in Antalya in southern Turkey, in fact, and wildfires have indeed struck here in a very devastating way. If you look behind me, you can just see the great swathe of fire damage as the fires swept through. It only took about 20 or 30 minutes for all of that to happen. Forests, fields and livelihoods lost, homes all gone in that. If you go down to the nearby villages, you'll see and speak to villagers who are just standing there shell-shocked looking at the rubble of their old homes. It's a similar story further west in Turkey, or in the Bodrum area and Marmaris area, and also, as we'll hear a bit later, in Greece they've seen some devastating scenes. And this kind of extreme climate event is precisely what the IPCCC is talking about when it says that extreme weather is going to get worse and worse if nothing is done about climate change. So let's look at the key points of what the report says. First of all, the world is about a degree warmer today than it was in 1850. 1850, that's pre-industrial time, so it's warmed 1 degree since then. Within a generation, the report says, we'll likely see the Arctic Sea free of ice for the first time. The greenhouse gas emissions of the past and those we're likely to produce in the future will lead to, and this is quite chilling, irreversible changes, especially to our oceans, ice sheets and sea level rise. And extreme weather events, the like of which I've just been talking about, have become more common. That means wetter monsoons, longer droughts, stronger cyclones, and yes, extreme heat events. All right, let's hear now from Asad Beg, who rounds up the latest developments.
It's a bleak picture. This year alone has seen storms, floods, and wildfires. Now, according to scientists, it is unequivocal that humans are largely to blame for warming the oceans, land and sea through our burning of coal, oil and gas.
You've been telling us for over 3 decades of the dangers of allowing the planet to warm. The world listened, but didn't hear. The world listened, but it did not act strongly enough. And as a result, climate change is a problem that is here now. Nobody is safe, and it's getting worse faster.
The first UN report issued in 1990 had predicted human-caused climate change would become evident. At the time, it couldn't prove with evidence that it was happening. That's now changed. On nearly every measurement, our climate is more extreme, and is set to get worse.
Human activities are causing climate change and making extreme weather events more frequent and severe. Second, it shows that climate change is affecting every region on our planet. And lastly, it explains that strong, rapid, sustained reductions in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions would be required to limit global warming.
Right now, it's some of the world's poorest countries that are feeling the effects, but they contribute less to greenhouse gases. There is hope though. If the biggest emitters are able to commit to and deliver sharp reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, we may see some positive changes. But it would happen within the next 20 years. The COVID-19 pandemic briefly reduced air pollution, but it did not halt climate change. The damage, it seems, is already done. Some issues like Greenland's glaciers melting and sea levels rising are irreversible. And unless there's dramatic change in human behaviour, the world should expect an unsettled and uncertain future. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera.
Let's get some analysis now. We can hear from Tom Burke, who's from the think tank E3G. So, Tom, thanks for joining us here today. The world is clearly in trouble. The UN Climate Summit in Glasgow is coming up. What needs to happen now at the policy level?
Well, the most important message from this report is that we've got to stop burning fossil fuels as fast as we can. And that means that the summit meeting in Glasgow is a really important moment for the world to come together and start doing more than it's already been doing to make that happen. And I suppose there are three things that have really got to come out. We've got to, first of all, move forward the $100 billion that were promised to help the emerging countries play their part. And we've not done that. The second thing that's got to come out is we've got to have commitments from countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 9 gigatons of carbon right away, so that we've got any chance of keeping the temperature below 1.5. And then we've really got to agree to put an end to the use of coal in our energy systems.
But the thing is, Tom, we've said this countless times, haven't we? All these things have got to happen, and this is what needs to take place, but it never does. Why is this time going to be any different? In what way will this report add heft to those negotiations in Glasgow? Can it really make a difference?
Well, what I think has really happened, and the events you've just been describing make it very clear that the things that are happening in people's lives are validating the science experientially for them. I think that will matter politically. But at the end of the day, this really is a problem for politicians to solve. We have the technology. We know we can afford to do this. It's really a question of politicians recognizing how urgent and immediate this problem is, and actually doing the things we already know we need to do in order to solve it. Now, why will this time be different? I honestly don't know that it will. It really depends on how our politicians react to the kind of pictures you've been showing.
You say we have the technology, but really, do we? Do we have the ability to make that giant energy transition that is needed by as soon as 2050? That's less than 30 years. We're just not ready for that, are we?
Well, again, technologically, it's no, I mean, given the kind of technological means we have today and the way the globe can, it's not bigger than it was, than the exercise involved in the United States after Pearl Harbor in turning their economy over from producing cars to producing tanks in less than a year. We're much more technically competent and indeed economically competent than we were then. The US was able to do it then. The world is technically capable of doing it now, but it really is a question whether we can find the right kind of political agreements to do that. But I don't think that we know the technologies we need to do to replace fossil fuels. We know they're there. We're not investing them enough in them at scale in order to meet the deadlines we need to meet.
Great to get your thoughts, Tom. Appreciate that. That's Tom Burke from the think tank E3G. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the wildfires have not just taken place here in Turkey. We've also been seeing terrible, devastating scenes in Greece. Vast areas have been destroyed there. Zain Bezravi has been our correspondent covering those fires, and he's been covering them for several days now. And Zain, wildfires aren't uncommon in Greece, but this is very different. It's on a completely different scale, isn't it?
That's exactly right, Nick. We spoke to the program director for Greenpeace Greece, and she said this is one of the most acute seasons of wildfires that we've seen, and it is now the new normal. It is too late to go back. That when we consider seasonal weather, what we're seeing now is the new normal. When you say something is irreversible, that means that these weather patterns are likely to be how the weather patterns are from now on, and there is nothing we can do to change that now. And that is simply the reality for places such as Greece and others experiencing extreme weather. We spoke to a team leader on one of the fire rescue teams here on Evia Island, and he said that they are doing the best they can, but they feel like they are fighting a losing battle, and it's because the scale of these fires is absolutely enormous. Now, he said this is absolutely an ecological disaster. Along with the ecological disaster, we're seeing people having personal crises. This is certainly a national disaster, but people are having personal experiences on an individual level. But in parallel to the ecological catastrophe, we're seeing an economic catastrophe play out as well. When you talk about life not being the same anymore. The way of life for people changing from now on because of climate change. This is what we're talking about. I'm just going to pan up and show you here. That helicopter is one of several doing flyovers for fire rescue here. What's happening now is it is reloading its water bays at a beach town resort. It is reloading its water bays to fight fires in nearby Evia. We came in on a road in that direction, the direction that the helicopter is now traveling in. We were in those areas. We were on the roads, driving in through the forests. Those small fires we saw along the way are now reigniting and sparking new larger fires, which is why we've seen helicopters rerouted to this area of the north of Evia Island. One helicopter just finished refueling. We've got another one already in these waters. Nick, when you say there's economic catastrophe, I want to make it very clear. These waters, at this moment in time, at any other year, these would have been filled with people swimming on the beach, people coming to this tourist hub to enjoy a vacation, to get away from the heat, to escape the heat, to come to the beach. Now it is a completely different profile. This landscape is now being used as a front line to carry out firefighting operations for forest fires that are ongoing as we speak. You see a giant smoke cloud, ash cloud all over these islands. Any other year at this time, you would have a clear view of the coastline. But instead, we are looking at an environment that has totally changed. There is a large boardwalk behind me running the length of this beach. Restaurants, shops, hotels, all empty, all deserted. The beach chairs here, there's no one on them. This whole area is completely different from how it's been in the past. And that's because the ecological catastrophe that we've been witnessing for the last week has taken a huge toll on one of Greece's most important economic revenue generators, and that is the tourism industry. And you can see why. Just beyond the boardwalk, there are hills and forests that are covered in smoke and ash from these ongoing wildfires. And really, when we talk about the fact that life as we know it is now changed forever, this is what we're talking about. This space, this publicly occupied civilian territory, these residential areas, these tourist hubs on the Aegean coast, a major revenue generator for Greece, are unlikely to be that anymore during these wildfire seasons.
Yeah, Zain, that's exactly it, isn't it? Horrendous scenes, life-changing scenes, as you say. All right, Zain Bezravi there in Greece. Thanks very much indeed. OK, not only wildfires that have constituted the extreme weather that we've been seeing in recent weeks, also big floods, devastating, fatal floods in Germany and in Belgium. More than 200 people killed just over 3 weeks ago. Let's hear now from Step Vassen, who's in Arvela. So, Step, the floods, as I say, were a little over 3 weeks ago. How are things now?
Yes, I'm here in our island, Nick. It's a historic town, but also very much a dead town at the moment, and also a town in which people told me from the very beginning that they only saw disasters on television. They never saw disasters with their own eyes, and they never expected the effects of climate change to hit this town so soon. I mean, experts were talking about possible flooding due to climate change in these parts of the world, maybe by 2050. But it's now 2021, and this is the result of 3 days of torrential rains. Amounts of water they haven't seen here before. Rivers burst their banks. The small river R, which is nearby this town, totally overflooded this area. It is a tourist town, restaurants, tourist shops, they're all closed now. And I'll show you one example of how such a shop looks like right now. This is a shop for hearing aids here in the center of Ahrweiler. And you can see this is all that's left of it. There's only cables hanging. Nothing in this room, in this area, shows that there was ever a shop here. And that's the same people have been telling me here. I've been covering this story for the last 3 weeks. They don't even know if they can come back to this area. There's no electricity, infrastructure is down, and they never expected it. They were so taken by surprise. They got their warnings on the phone, but they said, well, of course it wouldn't be this serious. We could still be at home, but they couldn't. So people had to scream to tell them to go upstairs. And many, of course, were sadly too late and they died. And I'll take you back to these first days after this flooding started, when people started to realize that climate change is actually very serious and is actually very nearby.
Floods came as a complete surprise to many. On Highway 265 in Germany, people were returning home from work. But near the town of Erfstadt in North Rhine-Westphalia, they were suddenly confronted with a wall of water 12 meters high. Remarkably, everyone survived. There had been 3 days of torrential rain, in some places up to 150 millimeters in just 48 hours. Germany normally gets about half of that in the whole of July. In nearby towns and villages along the River Aar, there was also shock at the sudden rise in water levels. And there were tragic consequences. In Sinzig, 12 residents in a home for the disabled died when they weren't evacuated in time. What remains of these horrifying moments are the thick layers of mud sweeping through houses, restaurants and shops. People's lives have been changed forever. We met priest Heiko Marketson in the historic wine town of Ahrweiler, where dozens of people died. He tells us of a man who lost both his parents.
He told me the image of the woman being swept away, waving her hand, crying for help. You know, I have to...
And they didn't
yeah, they didn't make it. And I'm not sure if they were found.
Across the border in Belgium, where at least 40 people died, a criminal investigation has begun to find out who is responsible for a failure in the warning system.
We have nothing left, no home, no furniture or clothes. It's so hard, but I say to myself, at least I saved my child. As a mother, that's the most important.
The river Meuse burst its banks and flooded parts of Liège province, including hundreds of municipalities. There was also damage on the Dutch side of the border in the town of Valkenburg. With estimates, the cost could reach billions of dollars. While the water has receded, the images of these sudden deadly floods will remain with people forever. Some experts say building better protection measures won't be enough in the future, and more steps need to be taken to prevent temperatures rising. Only then can people feel safe again.
A step focused very much on governments to take action now. How much of a wake-up call has this been for Germany?
Well, that's a very good question, Nick. This is one of the most industrial areas here in Germany and even in Western Europe. This is all based on fossil fuels. There's a lot of coal-powered plants in this particular region. The Prime Minister of North Rhine-Westphalia is one of the potential successors of Chancellor Angela Merkel, who will stop after 16 years as a Chancellor after the elections in September. So the main question is, if he is going to be elected, will he push through for climate change, for renewable energy, this energy transition? He has been criticized for doing it too slow. Germany is known for a lot of investments in renewable energies, but also known still for these coal-powered plants and this use of fossil fuels. So the big wake-up call will come in September. Hopefully, when these elections will take place, then people here in Germany have to decide if it's a wake-up call or business as usual.
All right, Steph, thanks for that. Steph Aston reporting there from Germany. Before I hand back to you, Emily, I just want to show you the village just down here of Kalamla. It's more of a town, I'd say, or at least it was, because all you can see now is the mosque, which was unscathed pretty much, and that kind of blue-grey house. But surrounding that area, there were 20 or 30 houses, and they've all been completely obliterated by the fire. A lot of them have now been reduced to rubble by bulldozers, and it was down there that we have seen consistently. There's a man who's by that white building who's just been sitting there day after day, just staring at the rubble of what was his home and small farmstead, and just completely shell-shocked. And, you know, that's what it is like for many, many people. So really the focus very much onto world leadership now. Fast forward to Glasgow and the UN Climate Summit. And many are saying that is make or break for the action that's needed to be taken against climate change.
Nick, they are devastating scenes. Thank you so much for your comprehensive report there. Nick Clark, our environment editor, and thank you to our team with that update on the landmark UN report.